he's doing, then you just take pregnancies as they come. Sort of like mosquitoes that you can't swat off. It's like, oh, another pregnancy. You see, here we keep you distracted. I'm going to assume that you're all fertile right now, but you got soccer practice later. Don't get pregnant yet. And you got college coming up. Don't get pregnant yet. And as long as we can burn up those first few years, all that's left is those really depressing, I'm struggling to get pregnant in the later years of your life. Girls, what you don't realize is, right about now, if you walk within 100 feet of a loose sperm, you're probably pregnant. That's science right there. Because in these early years of your life, you are the most fertile. It happens on its own just about. So by distracting you during these years, we push you back to a limited reproductive life with less reproductive success too. If you started now, it's very, very easy to get pregnant. And you'd be pregnant pretty much back to back to back to back, 10-month spacing or something. Somebody mentioned this. Number 4, with really high death rates, you're always going to have really high birth rates. Assuming that so many of them die, you just crank out a whole bunch of babies because, you know, 1 out of every 5 will make it to adulthood. In an environment that's horrifically poor, having a whole bunch of babies isn't even having a lot of population growth. It just takes a whole bunch of babies to have population stability. You all know that like anemones make like 38 trillion babies or whatever, but very few of those become adult anemones.
Wait, how do you say that?
How do I say that? I would say that high death rates necessitate high birth rates.
Anemones.
Did I say it wrong? Anemone. How did you say it? Come on. If you say it, I'll say it.
Anemone.
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 Anemone. Okay, I got it.
Wait, somebody calling me out? Raise your hand if you're a zoologist. It's anemone. Google it. Google it. Anemone. And problem number 5, in poor countries, having a lot of babies might give you a leg up on the competition because there's this thing called the labor effect, where more babies is more hands on the field or more helpers in the factory or whatever. I've got to remind you that there's an entirely different world out there for most of your fellow humans. There's a world where nobody asks a woman how many children she wants to have, and that woman doesn't really think about changing what her body's going to do with fertility. She's been raised in a world where women just have a whole bunch of babies, and it's a pretty horrible, tragic world where most of those babies die anyhow. Death rates are kind of easy to fix, and so in our modern developed world, we've started to prevent those deaths. But changing those number of births, that's still out of reach. So you live in a period of time where a whole bunch of humans are still having the same number of 12 or 15 children per lifetime. And now, instead of most of those babies dying, many of them are making it to adulthood. So, you know, population's growing because a woman might have 12 or 15 surviving children in her life. My grandfather had 13 sisters. No, 12 sisters. He was the lucky 13th boy. Sorry, the lucky 13th child, which turned out to be a boy. Then his parents died, and he got to provide for most of his sisters. Different world, right? That's not the life that you probably would expect to lead. We looked at age structures last Friday, but now that I have a couple of minutes left, and I have this interesting slideshow, and I think I have a couple of minutes. Anybody know how many minutes? I have 8 minutes. That's just enough for me to show you some really neat age structures. Are you guys curious about these? Yeah. Some of these are actually, I think, really fascinating. So here we go. Watch this. First of all, the 4 stages. We've talked about this. And I want to bring this back later, so I'm going to skip ahead. Check out this one. California's different demographics. You've all heard that California is becoming a much more brown state. You can see Hispanics like myself are the future of a state that's becoming increasingly less white. And a lot of people would argue that that's because of the economics of being white or of being brown. Many of those things about options for a woman, about access to medicine, apply to different races differently in the same place. Check out this cool phenomenon. The baby boomers, of course, had children. So there are echoes to the baby boom and echoes to the spaces on the other side. So you can see your baby boom was made in the 1960s, was a big deal in college admissions in the 1980s, led to a lot of economic excitement. You all realize that as all those college students came out, our economy exploded. Disco and cocaine. Then, of course, in the year 2000, there was like a lot of people in the investing classes. And you might know that in the year 2000, our economy saw a very significant shift in where the money was going. And again, there was another wave of young people. And look at the year 2020. That's when you're entering college. You'll have the baby boomers retiring. So you're going to have a whole lot of old geezers leaving our economy and requiring public care. We have not done, as a nation, a very good job of planning for their retirement. See the country in white, 1982, in gray, 1995, and in black, the year 2030. You'll be alive for 2030. So how's your country going to be compared to the raging 80s or the raging 1990s? Well, in the year 2030, it's going to be pretty old. Like all those things about old people, like retirement homes and like Florida and like golf, AARP and IHOP. Our country's going to change. Yeah, Denny's. Our country's going to be a very different place in the year 2030. We'll have more old people around than we've ever had in the history of our country. By a lot. Almost twice as many as the country that I came to when I first came to the United States. Check it out. Across the United States, we are a young brown country and an old white country. Which may give you some validity to why you hear so many angry white guys on the radio or optimistic young brown people on the streets. I'm not trying to say good or bad. I just mean to say I wonder if this is reflected in our political discourse today. Like I feel like this helps me understand politics today. Hey, check out what AIDS did to South Africa and what it did to Botswana. Remember I told you, scooping out the productive classes? Look at Botswana in the year 2020 That is the worst future. Having a country where nobody is paying taxes. The productive years. You can imagine what Botswana would look like if they hadn't had an AIDS epidemic in red. Remember I told you about Australia? Aborigines and whites? How else would you explain this but institutionalized racism? It's the exact same country. But Aborigines do not have high life expectancy. They do have high infant mortality. They do have a lot of losses from preventable disease. They still have very high birth rates. While in that exact same country, white people are living in a totally different reality. Check out Europe and Africa. Like, where would you want to put your investments? If you're going to open a gas station, where are you going to have more people buying gas over the next 40 years? Europe's going to have less and less drivers because they got more and more geezers parking their car for good because they're going blind, right? 20 years from now, there's going to be less and less people learning to drive. More and more people hanging up their car keys in Europe. But look at Africa. Every 5 years, you got more drivers hitting the road for the next 50 years. This is why the entire world is investing in Africa today. It's not just that we are all kind-hearted, it's just that that's the part of the world that has a growing future. See, those are the economies of the future. Remember that you are not economically active at all ages. When you're a young person, you're just a drain on the economy, no offense. So if you look at the most developed regions, hold on a second. If you look at the most developed regions, economically active ages are disappearing, but retirement is growing. Now look at the least developed nations. Economically active ages are expanding. So that's the place to invest. Bye-bye, children.